sunlight was streaming through the lace-curtained window in Ray Wilson's tiny bedroom of his modest mobile home. But the soft rays of the sun were a direct contrast to the gloominess of the inhabitant. Ray stood in front of the full-length mirror in one corner of the bedroom, looking at his reflection as he slid on his suit jacket. His expression was sad and gloomy, but then again, Ray could not remember the last time he truly smiled or laughed. There hadn't been anything worth a smile in his life for the past 10 years. He didn't want to wear this suit, not because he'd lost a lot of weight, so the suit now hung on his tall frame without proper fitting, but because it was the same one he'd worn to his wife's funeral 10 years ago, and seeing it brought back painful memories that he would rather remain buried. But he was preparing to leave the house for another day of job hunting, and he needed to dress nicely. Yesterday, he'd finally scored an interview at a prominent bakery uptown, but the HR had denied him the job despite his years of experience and unbeatable qualifications. The man said, "If you really want a job, maybe you should make more effort to look nicer. We couldn't possibly employ you when you look this way. It's not a good look for our establishment." So here he was, putting on a suit, hoping it would make all the difference this time because he really needed a job. It had been 1 month without a job, and things were beginning to get tougher. If this joblessness persisted for another month, hunger would set in, and life would go one notch lower. He was desperate at this point. You might wonder why Ray's life was spiraling so fast that he was going job hunting at 65 years old. Well, Ray Wilson was once a happy man. He was never wealthy, but he was comfortable enough, doing his passion with the most beautiful wife by his side. They didn't have kids, but they lived a life of contentment. As for Ray, for 45 years he worked in Sonny's bakery as the chief baker. He was the best, and understandably so because baking was the only thing Ray knew how to do. He didn't have an opportunity to go to college, so he sought employment at Sonny's bakery when he was 20. He got employed, and he was dedicated to the bakery. He married Sally that same year, and they started trying for kids. That didn't work out, but every other aspect of their lives did, so they were content. Things were going great until 13 years ago when Sally developed a rare form of cancer. Ray sold the house and car he'd managed to acquire from his job at the bakery so that he could afford Sally's treatment and chemotherapy. For 3 years, Sally fought bravely, but 10 years ago the cancer claimed her life. Ray's life took a drastic turn downhill after Sally's death. She was his best friend, his confidant, the only family he had. He moved into this mobile home and threw all his time and attention into the bakery, working as hard as he could and taking as many shifts as possible since there was no one to come home to. Working at the bakery made everything bearable because he didn't have time to think much about Sally's absence. Until 1 month ago. He'd gone to work as usual, only for Sonny Williams, the man who owned the bakery, to call him aside and tell him it would be his last day at work. Apparently, a construction company coveted the land where Sonny's bakery was built and contacted Sonny to purchase it. At first, Sonny disagreed, but they upped the ante and offered him a substantial amount of money, which Sonny took. He said the old bakery would be demolished in a few days, and Ray had to go. It broke his heart. The bakery was home, and he knew the lay of it like the back of his hand. Sonny gave him a small sum of money as his entitlement and bade him farewell. It was his second major heartbreak after Sally's death, and Ray cried his heart out when he got home. Ray looked at himself one last time wearing the suit and turned away from the mirror. He walked out of the house into the sunny morning. "Good morning, Mr. Wilson," a neighbour greeted with a smile. "Still job hunting?" "Yes." "Good luck." She waved and walked into her house. Good luck, Ray thought as he walked up the road. He needed a healthy dose of it today. He had always prayed for a long life, but after the recent events, he didn't even want that anymore. He just needed to find a job to sustain him until his days were over, and he hoped the end came soon. It was time he saw Sally again. There was nothing in this world for him anymore. Was there a bakery in heaven? Ray's thoughts were all over the place, and as he neared the high-end residential part of the city, he had a new idea. For weeks now, he had been looking for employment in all the bakeries and fast food restaurants in town. They all turned him down. Some would politely say, "We are sorry, we have no vacancy right now," even though they had a vacancy poster outside their establishments. It hurt, but Ray appreciated the politeness. Some didn't bother with graciousness. They told him, "You are too old for a job like this. We need someone young and full of energy, someone who can withstand the heat in the kitchen." Most said, "We have no use for someone with your expertise anymore. There are so many technologies and equipment in our kitchen that will do all the work you claim to offer. We don't need you." It was frustrating being kicked out of a job when it's the only thing you've known for 45 years. But this isn't the time for passion anymore, Ray thought, stopping in front of the first house on the block. This was the time for survival. He had to do what needed to be done to survive, even though it wasn't baking. He needed a job, whatever the job might be. He rang the doorbell and stepped backward, adjusting his tie and hoping he looked presentable enough. He'd lost over £100 since the funeral, and the suit hung limply, but it was of great quality. The door swung open, and a woman appeared, a curious look in her eyes as she assessed him. "Good morning. Do I know you?" "Good morning, ma'am." Ray bowed slightly. "I'm Ray. I'm so sorry to knock on your door this early morning, but I'm looking for employment. Do you need a cook, a baker, or anything?" The woman eyed him skeptically for a second. "No, I cook and bake for myself." "Thank you." "Well, that was worth a try. I clean too," Ray said. "I'm sorry," the woman smiled good-naturedly. "This is only a 3-bedroom house, and we don't even have kids yet. I do all the cleaning too. There's really nothing you can help with. I'm sorry, but you can check with my neighbour." Without waiting for a response, she closed the door softly. Ray's heart plummeted as he stepped down from the porch and walked to the next door. He rang the doorbell again, and this time a man peeked out. "DoorDash?" he asked. "Where's my food?" "No, not DoorDash." Ray forced a chuckle. "My name is Ray and I'm—" "If you're not DoorDash, please step away from the porch. I don't know you." "I need employment," Ray rushed. "I can cook and bake. I can also clean, mow your lawns, anything." "Oh, I'm sorry, man, but I don't need any of these services for now," the man said gently. "But you can keep checking down the block. I'm sure you'll find something." Ray's heart broke further when the door slammed shut in his face. Wow, why was employment so scarce? He was willing to do anything right now. Ray kept knocking on every door, asking to do the most menial jobs in exchange for cash. But everyone kept turning him down. He reached the last house on the block, and this time, as he walked to the door, he had no hope. This house was bigger than the rest and looked more luxurious. Whoever lived here must have already employed all the staff they needed to do the jobs for them. Discouraged, Ray pressed the doorbell and stepped back. He noticed through the glass door that his tie was askew and quickly fixed it, just as the door opened to reveal a young lady who looked to be about 25 years old. She eyed him condescendingly. "Good afternoon, ma'am," Ray greeted. "My name is Ray." "I don't care what your name is," the lady snapped. "Who are you? I'm not expecting anyone, so what do you want?" Ray cleared his throat. "I was walking past and noticed your lawn is so full and in need of mowing, so I was wondering if—" "No need," she interrupted with a rude eye roll. "We have a professional company that mows the lawn for us when we need to, so She waved him off and started to close the door. Desperation rose like bile in Ray's throat. "I'll do it for $5, he rushed. "Please." The lady paused and peeked out again. $5? Yes, Ray regretted it instantly, but it was too late to take it back now. He knew that if he attempted to increase it, she would slam the door shut without hesitation. The lady looked behind him at the full lawn and asked again, $5? Yes. Fine. She nodded. $5. Do you have a lawnmower? She looked him up and down, rolling her eyes again. Of course you don't. You're just walking around asking to mow lawns, hoping the house has a lawnmower. I'm sorry, Mum, blah, blah, blah. She raised her hand. Hold on. We have an old lawnmower in the garage. Ray waited on the doorstep while she fetched the lawnmower. She handed it to him. Will this work? It's old and we don't use it because a professional mowing company does the job for us. Eager to make $5, Ray turned the old thing on and nodded. It will work. Thanks, Mom. Do a good job, she said, walking into the house, or we're going to have a big problem. Ray got to work, carefully mowing the lawn until the grasses were low enough and looked good. It was a lot of work for $5, and he knew it was a steal. But he had no one to blame for this but himself. It wasn't the lady's fault that he was desperate, so he owed it to her to do a great job, regardless of the small pay. Ray toiled for 90 minutes under the sun until his clothes stuck to his back. He definitely chose the wrong day to wear a suit. When he finished mowing, he sat on the porch and carefully cleaned the lawnmower for another 30 minutes before knocking on the door. The door swung open again to reveal the lady. I'm done, Ray said, eager to get his money and leave. He was hungry and thirsty. The lady stepped onto the porch and inspected the lawn. Her eyebrows arched. Fair enough. I'd have to check the back before paying you. The back? Ray asked. She stared at him for a few seconds before laughing. The backyard, of course. Ray's stomach dipped. I only agreed to do the front lawn. No one said anything about the back. Excuse me, she growled. No one said anything about the front either. You assumed. What? Ray couldn't believe how hard she was twisting the situation. The front lawn alone was too much for $5. Imagine doing the backyard too. I'm sorry, ma'am, but I only agreed to mow the front lawn for $5. Pay me so I can leave. Pay you? She shook her head. I'm not paying you shit until you mow the backyard. When you work, do a complete job before asking for payment. So what's it going to be? Ray stared speechlessly at her, hating his life even more. This was a young girl trying to cheat him out of his labour because she could sense his desperation. What's it going to be, old man? Some of us have an actual job. I can't stand here with you all day. This isn't fair, Ray said. Well, boo-hoo. She started to walk into the house. Leave my porch before I call the police. Ray saw his $5 flash before his eyes, so he did the only thing he could to salvage the situation. I'll do it. Get to work, she said and slammed the door in his face. Silently, Ray picked up the clean lawnmower and walked to the backyard. A gasp fell from his lips when he saw that the back lawn was denser than the front. Instead of giving in to fatigue, he immediately got to work. He wasn't mad at the lady, Ray realized. She was young and would learn more about life as she grew older. If it weren't for fate, he probably would have had a child her age. He loved kids, and although he never let it bother him, it was painful when he and Sally couldn't have one of theirs. But as a chef in Sonny's bakery, he encountered kids daily, and these encounters always made him happy, especially Little C. Little C was a boy he met during his early years in the bakery. Ray was about 30 years old, or thereabouts. The little boy only had a mother, and their family was struggling so hard to stay afloat. He grew attached to Little C and always looked forward to his short visits every day. For 5 years he bonded with Little C until one day the boy stopped coming. Ray visited the boy and his mum but was told that they suddenly moved away. He never saw Little C again after that. He still thought about this little boy regularly and wondered how life was for him now. Life was unpredictable, and Ray himself went from grace to grass. He could only hope that little C, along with all the other children, was doing okay and braving the storm of life. After 2 hours of mowing the lawn, there was only a little patch of grass left, but Ray felt all the liquid in his body had evaporated. If he didn't drink water now, he would die. He was already having dizzy spells and knew it was from thirst. He was hungry also, but he could stick that out until he got paid. For now, he needed to replenish the lost water in his body. He walked to the sliding door in the backyard and knocked. There was no response. Beyond the glass, he could see the large, airy kitchen to the left side of the house. He just needed a glass of water. And he was good. Ray knocked again. "Miss!" There was no response. After a few seconds of mulling his actions over, Ray thought it wouldn't hurt to go in and fetch himself a glass of water. The kitchen was right there. He didn't have to walk through the house and see everything. He would go into the kitchen, drink water, and walk back out. And that's what he did. Ray slid the door open and headed straight for the kitchen, refusing to glance at anything else. He grabbed a glass from the racks and held it under the open tap. When the glass was full, he drank, feeling his body return to normal now that he had quenched his thirst. He was about to return the glass when he heard footsteps, and the lady appeared at the kitchen doorway. Her eyes flashed with anger when she saw Ray, and a scowl appeared on her face. "What are you doing in my house?" "I needed a glass of water." Ray raised the empty glass. You needed a glass of water?" She growled. "So you thought it wise to come into my house without asking me first? You are a thief. Only thieves break into a home without permission." Ray shook his head. "No, I'm not a thief. I knocked several times, but you didn't answer. I could see the kitchen from behind the glass and thought to grab a glass of water and be out immediately. I'm sorry, but I was so thirsty and—" "Shut up," she yelled. "Enough of your excuses. What do I care if you're thirsty? You came here to work. Was I wrong to let you mow the lawn? If I didn't come downstairs, you would have stolen something." "I don't appreciate you calling me names, ma'am." Ray tried to stay calm, but he had never stolen anything and didn't appreciate being labelled a thief. "I didn't try to steal anything from you. I only came here to do my job." She gasped like Ray attacked her. "You're yelling at me. You are yelling." "Ma'am?" This was already blowing up into an altercation, and Ray didn't want any problems. "Please, I don't want any issues," he said. "I'd leave now." "I want you to leave my property," she said, following Ray out the sliding door and into the backyard. "I only have a few more minutes and I'll be down mowing," Ray said. "No, I don't care. I want you to leave," she said. "You are a shameless thief, and I don't feel safe around you. Get the hell out." It suddenly dawned on Ray what the lady was trying to do. "Okay," he said. "I'd leave. Please pay me, so I'll go." "Pay you?" She scowled at him for a fleeting moment before whipping out her phone. "I'm calling the police." Ray knew he had been cornered, and if she called the police, it wasn't a good look. It seemed like she was the only one in the apartment, and he did go in without her permission. None of this would help his case. The last thing he wanted was to deal with a police case because of $5. With one last look at the lady, he turned and left the house. Hours after Ray left, a black Audi pulled into the house's garage. Inside the car was Craig, the owner of the house. He was a successful tech businessman who has doubled his income in the past 10 years and was now a 34-year-old multi-millionaire. In the passenger seat was his wife, Diana, and his mother, Amy, who was in the back seat with their 2-year-old daughter, Louisa. Craig and his family had just returned from a vacation and were excited to be home. "Ugh, it's so good to be back home," Diana laughed, looking out the window. "Are you saying you don't miss Italy?" Craig asked, getting out of the car. "Not even a little bit?" Diana laughed again. "I do miss Italy, but I miss my home more." Craig exited the car and got their luggage from the trunk while Diana and Amy joined him. Louisa was already fussing in Amy's arms, so they had to hurry into the house to get her fed. As they headed to the front door, Craig noticed the lawn had been perfectly mowed. They had been using Green Lawn Professional Services for the longest time, but this was their first time mowing the lawn to perfection. Craig felt like he could just roll in the grass and play. "The lawn looks good," his mother said, bouncing Louisa in her arms as she stepped onto the porch. "They did a great job this time." "That's exactly what I was thinking. We have Ashley to thank for that," Craig said, opening the door to let his family in. She probably monitored their agent well to ensure he did an amazing job. "The lawn isn't the only thing Ashley monitored," Diana said as they walked in. "The house looks clean too. I should call her later." Ashley was one of Craig's many assistants at work, and she had offered to stay in their home and maintain it while they were on vacation in Italy. At first, Craig didn't think it was a great idea, but now it seemed like everything worked out perfectly well. She had kept the house very nice while they were away. At the office the next day, Craig couldn't wait to appreciate Ashley's efficiency in caring for his home, even when he was absent. He had just finished a meeting with his staff when he brought it up in front of everyone. "Ashley, could you please stand up?" he asked from his position at the head of the conference table. Ashley rose to her feet, her gaze flitting about nervously. The conference room was quiet, as everyone silently wondered why the boss had Ashley standing when the meeting was over. "Ashley," Craig smiled, "I want to especially thank you for doing a wonderful job caring for my home while I was away." Relief flooded Ashley's face, and she smiled demurely. "Oh, it's nothing, sir." "It's something," Craig insisted. "It's important to me that I have staff who understand the importance of efficient work, whether or not I'm there to monitor them. I'll send you a gift to show my appreciation further." "Thank you, sir," Ashley said proudly. "And the lawn?" Craig asked. "I loved it. Who did it?" Ashley's eyes widened. "Sir?" "The lawn," Craig repeated. "Was it a representative from Green Lawn?" "Oh, yes," Ashley answered, nodding vigorously. "It was." "You monitored them?" Craig asked. "Because they have never mowed the lawn so perfectly." "Yes, I did," Ashley chuckled. "I kept a close eye on them because I know how particular you are about the lawn since you regularly throw private parties and BBQs. Craig laughed, further impressed by Ashley's thoughtfulness. Growing up, it was only he and his mother, with no family. Now that he was older, he liked having friends around, so he regularly threw weekend parties, which he did on his lawn. This was why having the lawn mowed perfectly was always important to him. He should definitely send Ashley a gift. She had officially become his favourite staff. "Hello, Mr. Jensen." Craig slid out from beneath the car he was working on and looked at the sidewalk to see his neighbour, John Finland, returning from a jog. "You always find the best vintage cars," John said, walking towards the vehicle, his eyes shining with admiration. "It's not really a find," Craig laughed. "Anyone can buy them." "Anyone with money can buy them," John corrected, and the two men burst into laughter. "These things are always more expensive than a normal car." "You're right," Craig nodded, running a hand across the glossy side of the vehicle. "This costs more than my Audi, and it can't even fit my entire family." "As with all vintage cars," John agreed. "I'm tempted to pool some money to buy something like this, but my wife would make me sleep in the garage for a year if I dare to." "Who told you I didn't sleep in the garage when I got this?" Craig wiggled his brows and John laughed. "But when I bought the second one, Diana just gave up on me and let me have my hobby." "I should leave before you convince me," John groaned, turning to leave. "Oh, before I go," he looked back at Craig. "Would you mind sharing the contact of the man who mowed your lawn?" he asked. "I've meant to ask any time I jog past, but I didn't want to come to your door." "Oh, you can search them up online," Craig answered. "They're called Green Lawn Services. They have a number somewhere on their website." I know about green lawn and have used them twice, John frowned. They're adequate, but not quite as neat as this. John nodded at the crisp lawn. I'd like the particular old man who did this job. Craig scrunched his face in confusion. I always use green lawn, he maintained, and they always send over about 3 young guys to cover my front and back lawn. I don't know about an old man. It was definitely an old man, John said. I saw him when I came out to grab something from my car, and he was the only one who mowed the entire lawn. I saw him do it. One old man? Craig asked. Mowed my entire lawn? Yep. Was he wearing a branded green lawn shirt? He wasn't from Green Lawn, I'm sure, John said. He was wearing a black suit. This time, Craig laughed. An old man wore a suit to mow my lawn? Yes, John stressed. How come you don't know about it? It's your lawn. He was on your property. John frowned and checked his smartwatch. I've got to go, he said, and jogged to his house, leaving Craig in absolute confusion. Craig walked toward the backyard to clean up the oil smudges on his body before entering the house and saw Diana tending to her garden. She took one look at him and frowned. What's wrong, babe? Craig turned on the tap and started to wash his arm. John stopped by on his way back from a run, he said, and he asked for the contact of the person that mowed our lawn. Diana laughed, watering her flowers. Everyone likes our lawn. When Ari stopped by yesterday, she commented on it. Yeah, but he said an old man did it, Craig said to her, wearing a suit. What? Diana stopped watering. Green Lawn sends old men now? Craig laughed. Wearing a suit, for that matter. How do you mow wearing a suit? Before she could respond, Louisa's cry broke through the sliding door. Uh-oh. Diana brushed her muddy hands on her apron. I better go see what she wants, she said and rushed into the house. Coming behind you. Craig followed. Craig forgot all about the old man and the lawn until 3 days later when he ran into John again as he drove in from work. Any luck finding the old man? John asked hopefully, and this time Craig couldn't get it off his mind. Nah, but I'll let you know as soon as I do, he told John. Inside the house, he went straight to the security room to check the surveillance cameras. It wasn't like he was really worried, but he was curious about the old man who had mowed his lawn. If anyone had been on his property, like John said, he had to know. He didn't know the exact day the lawn was mowed, so he kept rewinding the tape until he stumbled upon a clip of Ashley talking rudely to a sweaty, tired-looking older man on the porch. Frowning, he kept rewinding the tape until it took him to the beginning, where the older man knocked on the door. Ashley opened the door and eyed this man condescendingly. Good afternoon, ma'am. My name is Ray. I don't care what your name is, Ashley growled rudely at the old man. Who are you? I'm not expecting anyone, so what do you want? Craig reared back, shocked at Ashley's blatant disrespect. Ashley was always respectful and polite to him and his wife. He never knew she was capable of such vitriol to a stranger, especially a harmless older man. The more of the interaction he watched, the greater his shock. Do a good job, or we're going to have a big problem, Ashley said, slamming the door in the man's face. Craig gasped. Did she just agree to pay the man $5 to mow the entire lawn? His heart broke as he watched the old man toil under the sun, working diligently despite knowing he had just been cheated. Craig watched the video, several things running through his mind, none of which was good. He was very disappointed in Ashley. First, paying the old man $5 for the lawn was a wickedly selfish thing to do. Before Craig left for Italy, he gave Ashley a huge sum of money to care for the house should she need anything. She also had access to one of his cards in case any bills required to be paid. Yet, she couldn't pay the man enough for his hard work. He couldn't believe that Ashley could be so callous. As he watched, the older man finished mowing and sat on the porch to clean the lawnmower. Craig's heart softened. He loved people who did their jobs adequately. And this man did more than he was required, especially for $5. Craig watched him clean the blades and dry the lawnmower before knocking on the door. He was about to take off the video when he noticed that instead of paying the man, Ashley inspected the lawn and turned her nose down at him. "Fair enough. I'd have to check the back before paying you." "What?" Craig's eyes widened. She expected the man to mow the back lawn too with $5. Unbelievable. All this time, the man had his back turned to the camera so Craig could not fully see his face, but he could only imagine the shock and sadness he was feeling. It had been weeks since the incident, and Craig's heart was broken just watching it happen. "I'll do it," the old man agreed to mow the back lawn, and Craig groaned at the pain in the man's voice. The surveillance camera showed nothing else as the man moved towards the backyard. Fortunately, Craig had cameras surrounding the house, so he switched to the camera surveilling the back and rewinding the clip. He stumbled upon a clip of Ashley and the man arguing in the back, but continued to rewind to the starting point when the man first walked into the backyard after talking to Ashley in front. Craig watched, impressed, as the man mowed the back lawn with the same effort and diligence as the front. By now, he'd been working for over 3 hours and looked tired and weak. Craig wished he could reach through the screen to comfort him, but there was no way. Soon the man grew tired and walked towards the back door. Craig instantly knew he needed water. He expected that Ashley should have already offered him a glass of cold water because mowing the lawn was taking work, especially when it was so sunny outside. Even when the men from Green Lawn came around, Craig or Diana always ensured they were well hydrated by offering them lots of cold water and energy drinks, and these were men who received hundreds of dollars for mowing. When Ashley didn't open the door, the old man slid it open and walked into the house. He went straight to the kitchen and poured himself a glass of water. He had just finished drinking and was about to return the glass when Ashley showed up with the nastiest expression on her face. Craig understood being upset that he took the liberty to come into the house without permission, but she had already been rude from the beginning, so her outburst was totally unjustified. She said the meanest things to the older man and called him a thief. To Craig's displeasure, Ashley ordered the man off the property without paying him his $5. Seeing the whole exchange in the footage, Craig's heart started to beat wildly in his chest. And it wasn't only because of the unfair treatment Ashley subjected the man to, but because the man looked oddly familiar. Craig zoomed on the screen even more. When he made out the old man's face, Craig was hit with memories taking him back several years, to when life was hard, and it was only him and his mother, to a life where he was little C. Suddenly it clicked, stunning him into speechlessness. The dejected face on the screen might be withered, stressed, and hopeless, but Craig would remember that face anywhere. It was Raymond Wilson, the baker. This was the man who let Craig in when he needed a father figure the most. He was the man who didn't let Craig and his mother go hungry when his mother was too weak to provide for them. His heart fell, and he sat back in his chair as the memories rushed back. 25 years ago. "See, hurry," Amy groaned, checking her wristwatch, "or we will both be late." Craig sighed and stuffed the rest of the dry, tasteless bread into his mouth. It went down his throat like a stone, and he drank some water. When he was done, he grabbed his bag and hurried to his mom, who led him out of the living room and into the busy streets. They lived in the shanty part of town, and every morning was busy and rushed. "Mum?" Craig asked as his mother rushed him down the pavement. His public school was only a few minutes' walk from home, and his mother would drop him off every morning before continuing to work. She worked 3 jobs. The closest one was 30 minutes from his school, and she walked there each day because taking the bus was expensive, and they needed every penny. "Did you forget Mother's Day at school today?" Amy sighed and crouched in front of him on the sidewalk, her eyes so sad that Craig instantly regretted asking. "I'm sorry, but they didn't give me a break at work," she said. "I also tried exchanging shifts, but it didn't work. I'm so sorry, see?" "It's fine, Mum," Craig smiled. "It's just for a few hours anyway. I'll be in the library." Amy stared at him for a few more seconds. "Here." She took out $1 from her purse and handed it to him. "For sweets." Craig's eyes lit up, and he took it. "Thank you, Mom. I love you, see? You're the best son," she said, tickling his sides. "God knew I would need the most understanding little man, and he gave you to me." As a little boy of 9 years, Craig knew his life was hard. He lived in a poor neighborhood with impoverished people and went to the poorest public school in the state, yet they were still poorer than most. However, times like this, when his mother complimented him, made everything worthwhile. He loved his mother to a fault because he saw how hard she worked, and it was all for him. She never bought herself new clothes or shoes. Every penny she made, no matter how small, went to him. His feeding, his education. Although his friends made fun of him for his worn clothes and shabby lunches, Craig appreciated his mother and wished to make life better for her in all the little ways he could. One of the ways he did that was by not complaining, no matter how unbearable a situation was. Even when they had the most unpleasant breakfast, or when they couldn't afford hot water during winter, or when he had to go to school without money, Craig never complained. He would smile at his mother and say, "It's fine, Mum." After school, Craig would walk home with some of his friends who lived in the same neighborhood. When he got home, he would use the house phone to call his mum and inform her that he was home. She would instruct him to lock the doors and stay indoors until she finished her shift at her second job and returned home. However, after school, instead of heading straight home, Craig would stop by for a few minutes at Sonny's bakery, where he would chat with Raymond for a few minutes before going home. Raymond was the chief baker at the bakery and the only lead male figure in Craig's life. That afternoon, when he walked into Sonny's bakery after school, Ray's face lit up like it always did when he saw him. Sometimes Craig wondered why the man was always so happy to see him. "Little C," Ray boomed with laughter behind the counter. "I've been waiting for you. You're a little late." I stayed back in school to do some reading," Craig answered, climbing onto the stool. Beside Ray on the counter was a show glass displaying all the baked goods Ray just made. He could smell the sweet aroma wafting out of the glass, and he tried to keep his eyes off it, even though his stomach was rumbling. There were days when his mother could afford to give him enough to afford some buns, but today she had only given him $1. "You know I know when you're lying to me," Ray said, ruffling his hair. "Something is wrong. Tell me what it is." Craig sighed. "Some of the boys at school were making fun of my shoes," he said sadly. "What's wrong with your shoes?" "Look." He raised a leg high, almost toppling off the stool. One of his shoes was missing a sole. "Have you told your mom?" Ray asked. "No, we can't afford this right now." "You can't know that," Ray said softly. "You have to tell her so she can walk towards getting a new one." Craig sighed and shook his head. "It's fine." "You won't worry," Ray smiled. "Soon you'll grow up to be a big boy and buy all the shoes in the world." "What if I don't have the money?" Craig asked worriedly. "What?" Ray rolled his eyes. "You will grow up to be a wealthy man. You would be able to afford all the shoes you want in the world. It would be so much, you won't wear the same shoes twice." Craig laughed, shaking his head. "You don't know that." "I do, let's bet on it." Craig held out his pinky finger, and Ray hooked his pinky around Craig's little one. "I bet you $1,000 that you will grow up to be a wealthy man and have thousands of shoes." Craig gasped. $1,000? That's a lot of money. Let's bet $2. Ray appeared thoughtful for a moment. Then he shook his head. "No, Sorry, let's do $1,000. Bet? But what if I don't have $1,000 to pay you? Craig asked, his forehead scrunched with worry. That's why you must grow up to be wealthy, so you don't have to worry about it. Craig mulled it over. He was only 9, so he still had much time to grow up. Fine, let's bet. Okay. Ray nodded excitedly and made the bet by crossing their pinky. But how do I grow up to be wealthy? Craig asked. You're asking for a cheat code, Ray laughed. If I tell you, then you will win. You're right. I'll have to find out for myself. I'll give you a hint. Ray looked around even though no one was in the bakery since it wasn't peak hours yet. He leaned forward. You have to make sure you read your books and pass all your tests and exams, he told Craig. Pay attention in class, listen to your mother, and be a good kid. Once you do all these, you'll be wealthy. Are you sure? I'm already passing all my tests and exams, Craig said hopefully. Then what are you worried about? Ray rolled his eyes. Craig vibrated in his chair. He could already envision everything he would do when he got rich. When I'm rich, I'll buy all the buns in the world and eat them all at once. Ray laughed so hard. I thought you wanted shoes. I like buns better, but I guess I'll need shoes too for church and other events, he said. I'll buy 1,000 shoes and some for you too. I'm grateful. I like Italian leather, just in case. I'll write that down. Craig slid down the stool. I have to go, sir. My mum would be expecting my call any minute now. Aren't you buying buns today? No. Ray shook his head, walking toward the door. I only have $1. Come here, boy. Ray motioned for Craig to return to the counter. He wrapped one bun in a foil and handed it over. You keep the $1 and buy something for your mum. No, it's all right, sir. You don't have to. Craig shook his head, trying not to stare hard at the bun. Come on, Ray insisted. A bun for a pair of shoes made of Italian leather. That's a good trade. Craig laughed and replied, I will repay you one day, Mr. Wilson. I promise. Thank you. You're welcome, kid. Life continued slowly for Craig and his mother until one morning, Craig woke up to his mother shivering like a leaf beside him. Her body temperature was hot and her teeth were chattering with cold. Craig couldn't make it to school because he was so scared, despite Amy telling him to go since he could walk there alone. Throughout that day, Craig remained by his mother's side until late evening, when she managed to pull herself out of bed to make food for both of them. By the next day, Amy's sickness had grown worse. They had no family, so it was just her and Craig, and there was little Craig could do. However, he learned to cook, so once a day he would make simple meals so he and his mother could eat. By the end of 1 week, Amy was still seriously sick, and Craig heard her begging someone on the phone to let her keep her job. He knew she had been fired because, aside from the sickness, she became sadder. By the end of the 2nd week, Craig opened the kitchen cabinet, and an empty void stared back at him. His mother was fast asleep, and he knew that once she was awake, she would start worrying about food. She was beginning to get better. Craig didn't want her worrying herself back into the precarious state of a few days ago. With these thoughts in mind, he slipped out of the house. Minutes later, he was walking into Sonny's bakery. He timed his visit to the time when he knew there would be no one patron in the bakery, and as he expected when he went in, it was only Ray behind the counter. Like always, Ray was happy to see him. This time, Ray walked out from behind the counter to hug him. "Little C," he said, ruffling Craig's hair. "It's been 2 weeks. I waited for you every day." Craig smiled. "I saw someone trying to get into the bakery through the back door," he said, and Ray gasped. "Wait here." With a frown, Ray hurried out of the shop and went through the back. Quickly, Craig reached into the show glass and took 2 large donuts, which he stuffed into his pockets. He had just wiped his hands clean when Ray returned. "There's no one there," he said. "He probably knew you saw him and ran away." Ray waved the matter off like it was inconsequential. "Tell me what you've been up to." For days, Craig continued to go to Sonny's bakery every evening. There he would steal 2 donuts, one for his mother and one for himself. Whenever his mother asked, he would lie that Ray gave it to him for free. It broke his heart to steal from Ray, but he didn't have any money, and his mother was still recovering. On the 5th day, Craig went to Sonny's bakery again. He was trying to think about how to get Ray out of the shop for a few seconds when Ray said, "Hold on, there's something I have to show you. I'll get it from the back." As soon as Ray disappeared, Craig reached into the show glass. He had only just taken 1 donut when Ray appeared, his hands on his hips. Craig's heart jumped into his mouth, and when he saw the disappointment in Ray's eyes, he dropped the donut and scrambled off the stool, bursting into tears. "I'm so sorry," he begged. "Please don't hate me, I'm so sorry." "I know you've been stealing donuts for a few days, Craig. I've been waiting for you to tell me why you're stealing them, but you haven't. So I set you up today." Craig's quiet sobs turned into a wail, and he ran out of the shop. Before he got home, he had to stay in an alley and cry his eyes out because his mother mustn't find out about this. That night, his mother managed to scrape something together so they could eat. For 3 days, Craig couldn't stop thinking about Ray. He felt heartbroken and disappointed in himself, like he had lost someone important. On the 5th day, he couldn't take it anymore and returned to Sonny's bakery. He was only a little boy, but he knew he must make things right with Ray. Surprisingly, when he walked into the shop on the 5th day, Ray greeted him with the same wide smile. "Ah, there you are. I was wondering when I would see you again," he said. Craig felt undeserving, so he hung his head and climbed onto the stool, unable to look the man in the eyes. "I am so sorry, sir. Please forgive me." Ray sighed and Craig continued. "My mother has been seriously sick for a while, and we have no one. I didn't want her to worry about food, and there was nowhere else I could go. Please forgive me, Mr. Wilson. I don't want to disappoint you." Ray walked out from behind the counter and held Craig's shoulder. "You're way more mature than your age," he said affectionately. "You're not my son, but I know you very well. You're not a thief, little C, and I knew you were taking the donuts for a reason. I just wished you had told me." "I'm sorry." Tears fell from Craig's eyes. "Don't cry," Raymond said, wiping his tears. "Don't worry, I've got you. Okay, you can come in here and take bread, or buns, or anything for free. I'll handle it." "Really?" "Yes. How's your mum?" "She's not perfectly okay yet, but she's doing okay." "You haven't been going to school?" "No." That day, Ray called someone to handle his shift, and he followed Craig home with a bag full of baked goods. He introduced himself to Amy, gave her the food, wished her quick recovery, and complimented her upbringing of Craig. Craig was shocked that Ray complimented him instead of reporting Craig for stealing his goods. For the next 3 months, Craig went to see Ray at the bakery, and every day he would return home with baked goods. His life changed one Saturday morning when his mother took a call. "Is this Amy Jensen?" "Yes." His mother sat up. "It is she." "We're calling from Avalon Montessori School, California. We are pleased to inform you that your application has been reviewed and you have been selected as an economics teacher in our school. You would resume on Monday at 8 a.m. and head to the admin's office for more information." "Oh my God," Amy squealed. "Thank you Wait, this Monday?" "Yes, in 2 days," the voice answered. "Would that be a problem?" Amy's mouth moved wordlessly for a moment before she shook her head. No, I will be there." The call ended a minute later, and Amy danced around the living room. Craig had never seen his mother this way and enjoyed it, until she stopped dancing and said urgently, "We're moving away, Craig. We have to go to California, and we must leave tomorrow." "What?" The blood drained from his face. I know you will miss your friends, but this job is great. I cannot miss it. There is accommodation in the staff quarters where we can live, and it's a school, so I can guarantee that you will be able to complete your education." His mother was saying so many things trying to explain why they had to leave, but Craig was stuck on the fact that he would never see Ray again. "Mom," he cried, "what about Mr. Wilson? We can't leave tomorrow. We have to see him." The blood drained from Amy's face too, like she just remembered Ray, and together they went to the bakery. To Craig's shock and disappointment, he met someone else who said Ray wouldn't make it in until Monday. Craig and Amy didn't know his house, and the staff at the shop didn't know where he lived either. The next day, Craig and Amy left town, and it was the last time they saw Ray. In California, his mother became a teacher, and Craig started attending school again. As much as he missed Ray, he never forgot the keys to wealth that Ray gave to him. He also never forgot the man who was there for him when no one else was. "Babe?" Diana peeked into the security room, and her eyes widened when she saw Craig. "Are you crying?" She hurried towards her husband, concern etched in her voice. "What's wrong?" Craig sniffed and wiped the tears from his eyes. Before him was the laptop, still showing the surveillance tape with Ray's weathered face frozen on the screen. Diana sat on his lap and wiped his tears softly. "Babe, what's wrong? And what are you doing here anyway?" She glanced at the laptop screen. "Who is this?" "Remember the conversation we had in the garden? Where I told you about John asking for the old man that mowed our lawn?" "Yes." "So I ran into John again today and he asked me again. I was curious, so I came here and watched the surveillance cameras." "Okay, so what happened?" "First, Ashley is fired." "What?" Diana screeched. "Ashley? Why? She's so good." "Far from it." Craig reached for the laptop. "Watch this." He played the surveillance clips from the beginning, from when the older man walked up to the door until Ashley ordered him off the property without paying him a dime. Diana was very upset when she finished. "I cannot believe this," she said. "This is inhumane. I want to speak with her before you fire her." "And you know the most painful part?" "What?" Diana asked, still frowning. "I know this man," Craig said, pointing at Ray. "He was one of the best things that happened in my life as a kid." Craig started looking into Ray's background and learned about his problems with the bakery. That's when he came up with a wild idea. He didn't worry about the potential financial risks. In fact, nothing really mattered at that point. He had one thing on his mind: make things right. As usual, the soft rays of sunlight filtered through the window in Ray's room, but it did nothing to uplift his mood. He was lying on the bed, his eyes closed, stomach rumbling with hunger. He'd had no success in job hunting, and after that silly girl ripped him off $5 almost a month ago, Ray gave up trying. He was waiting for his savings to run out, and maybe hunger would finally take his life, and he could be free from the sufferings of this world. As he contemplated his life, there was a knock on his door. Ray sat up, wondering who it could be since he hadn't had any visitors in 10 years. Curious, he walked to the front door. He didn't have a peephole, so he had to open the door to see who was standing outside. It was a young, handsome man who looked strangely familiar, but Ray couldn't place the face at all. "Good afternoon," he greeted. "Good afternoon, sir," the young man answered, his voice vibrating with excitement. Ray looked him up and down, wondering why the man looked so happy to see him. "Seems you're at the wrong door." "No." The man shook his head, laughing. "I'm at the right door." "Do I know you?" Ray asked. "Yes." The man nodded gravely. "You owe me $1,000. "What?" Ray's heart skipped. He didn't even have $100 in his name. Fear gripped him. God, he didn't want any trouble. "You thought you could hide from me." the man said, "but debt is debt." "I don't know you, please," Ray said urgently. "How do I owe you $1,000? "I have about 500 shoes in my closet," the man said, "and 5 years ago I bought a box full of buns and ate them all. I threw up all night, but it was worth it. However, I think I like shoes better than buns. And oh," the man stretched out the bag he was holding, "this is for you." Ray's head was turning with how fast everything was going. His gaze dropped to the glossy bag in the man's hands, and he narrowed his eyes at the designer name scribbled beautifully on it. "What is that?" "Shoes. They're Italian leather, except your taste has changed." How did this man know he liked Italian leather? Ray looked closely at the face as he mulled over every strange thing the man had said. "You owe me $1,000. I have about 500 shoes in my closet. I bought a box full of buns and ate them all." Ray's mind travelled back to a conversation similar to the one he had with the little boy he loved so much. Little C. His gaze widened as he took in the appearance of the boy standing before him. Recognition dawned as everything clicked into place. Ray shook on his feet. "Little C?" The young man laughed and nodded. "That's me." "Oh my God." They hugged each other tightly, and Ray cried. But for the first time in years, he also laughed. "I cannot believe this." "Me too," Craig said. "I've looked everywhere for you. Come inside, come inside." Ray pulled Craig into his home and led him to one of the rickety couches in the living room. "Oh my God!" He looked at Craig in disbelief. "Is this really you?" "I looked everywhere for you," Craig said. "I returned to Sonny's bakery, but it's now a construction site." "How did you find me?" Craig sighed. "I'm too embarrassed to say it, but I will because I already made things right." "What are you talking about?" "You mowed my lawn." Ray paused for a moment before understanding dawned. "No way," he gasped. "That was your house?" "That is my house. I was on vacation in Italy and didn't know what happened. Everyone kept complimenting the lawn, which eventually led me to check the surveillance cameras, and that's when I found out everything." Ray sighed. "Who was the lady? She can't be your daughter." "No, thank God. She's a staff member in my company. She has been fired." "No." Ray shook his head, hating the idea because he knew how hard it was to find a job. "Don't do that on my behalf." "It's already done," Craig said. "And not only was she rude to you, but I also found out she threw numerous parties in my house when I was away." "Oh my God!" "Forget about her." Craig smiled at Ray. "Seeing you today is one of the happiest days of my life. I have prayed tirelessly for the day I will see you again." That day marked a turning point in Ray's life. The ride to Craig's house was quiet, filled with the soft hum of the engine and the intermittent whoosh of passing cars. Ray gazed out the window, wondering what the day held in store. Upon arrival, Craig led Ray through the front door with a proud grin, as if he was introducing Ray not just to a building, but to a future. Inside, the scent of fresh flowers and baked goods filled the air. Amy stood in the hallway, her eyes widening as she saw Ray. For a moment she was motionless, then her emotions cascaded, and tears streamed down her cheeks. Ray, unsure but touched, offered a shy smile, his heart swelling with a mixture of joy and disbelief. "Oh, Ray!" Amy exclaimed, stepping forward to embrace him. "Look at you!" Ray, enveloped in the warmth of her hug, could only nod. "It's so good to see you, Amy." As they settled in the living room, light filtering through sheer curtains, Amy began recounting tales of the past, her voice threaded with nostalgia and sorrow. "I've always hoped the best for you," Amy confessed, her voice thick with emotion. "And I know things have not been perfect, but you're still the same through it all." Their conversation drifted to Craig and his childhood, and how Ray, despite being just a man from the bakery, had influenced him profoundly. You were his compass, Amy said softly, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. You taught him values that shaped the man he is today. The day melted into evening, and they gathered around the dinner table, a feast laid out before them as the sunset painted the room gold. The clink of cutlery and murmur of shared memories filled the space with warmth and laughter. Finally, Craig stood, tapping his glass gently to draw attention. The room quieted, all eyes on him. I have something important to announce, he began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Today, I want everyone here to know that Ray is now, and will always be, a part of this family. He's living with us, starting today. A stunned silence followed, then Ray slowly rose, his face a mixture of surprise and confusion. Craig, you don't have to do this, he stammered, his voice barely a whisper across the table. But Craig only smiled, his eyes sincere. But I do, Mr. Wilson. If it weren't for you, the values you instilled in me when I needed them most, none of this, he gestured around, would exist. Your family. Tears, smiles and cheers filled the room as Ray, overwhelmed and grateful, accepted the new chapter of his life, enveloped in the warmth of a family reunited. 6 months had passed. Ray sat behind the desk in a magnificent office, overlooking a beautiful, quiet creek. He had finally found a job as the CEO of Ray's Bakery. Yes, it was his own bakery, built for him by Craig, who had now become like a son to him and had changed his life in only half a year. Ray was wearing a maroon suit, and this time it fitted him perfectly. The black suit he wore to his wife's funeral still hung in the wardrobe in his room, the room in his house that was located in a high-end residential area in town, on the same street he had begged to be employed as a cook or cleaner only 7 months ago. Time had changed things. Ray's Bakery was growing into a successful business and had a new family and the most beautiful granddaughter, Louisa. Hey, boss. His office door swung open, and he looked up to see Amy. She worked with him in the bakery and liked to call him boss while they were there. He always rolled his eyes at it, but secretly, he loved it. As Amy walked to the table with a smile, Ray watched her. She had always been pretty, even as a young woman struggling to raise her son through hardship. Now, she was gorgeous. Her skin shone beautifully, and there were hardly any wrinkles on her face. As she slid into the chair across the desk, Ray's heart skipped. Come on, Amy said. Let's go or we'll be late for dinner and Diana will have our heads. Oh, shoot, Ray laughed, shutting down his laptop. I almost forgot. That's why you have me. Amy drummed her fingers on the table. Come on. I didn't bring my car, so we'll ride together. She grinned. There was something about that beautiful grin that gave Ray a burst of courage. Amy, I'd like to take you to dinner. She paused. What? He lost his bravado, but there was no going back, so he cleared his throat and repeated himself. I'd like to take you to dinner. That's if you want. Anytime you're ready. Amy laughed. Are you asking me on a date, Ray Wilson? Ray's heart beat wildly. Yes. Then yes. Amy laughed. I'd love to go on a date with you. Yes. Ray pumped his fist in the air, and Amy laughed harder. For tonight, we have to hurry before Craig starts to worry. I swear that boy worries about us like we're children. Ray hurriedly followed Amy out of the office, and as he drove to Craig's house with Amy in the car, he silently prayed for a long life. This was a beautiful life, and he was just starting to enjoy it.